leukocyte, vascular endothelium, and what is the selectins have done? They made it to transiently bind with the vascular endothelium, then it will start rolling. Now doctor, let us summarize the story of selectins. Selectins basically bind with a carbohydrate. They initiate the temporary leukocyte endothelial interaction. We have L-selectin, P-selectin, E-selectin. To what will they bind? How will they mediate? Where are they located? This is a very important graphic which you need to basically appreciate. So how is this selectin mediated leukocyte adhesion, doctor? It is basically very weak. It will only allow the leukocyte to roll along the vascular endothelial cell, but not squeeze through the vascular endothelial cell, is what need to be basically remembered. Now doctor, what factors will control the expression of these selectins is one of the important issue for the examiner. L-selectin is down-regulated by interleukin-1. P-selectin is up-regulated by histamine and thrombin, and also by TNF-alpha, IL-1 and IL-4. E-selectin is up-regulated by TNF-alpha and IL-1 beta. So these are the various aspects. So that's all the story of selectins. Then the third important protein, what is that, doctor? We have immunoglobulin family of adhesion proteins. ECOM1, ECOM2. What does ECOM stand for? Intracellular adhesion molecule 1 and 2. ECOM1 and ECOM2. Where are they expressed? Is it on the leukocyte or on the endothelium? They are expressed on the endothelial cells. What will these things will be doing? First, P-selectin, E-selectin on the vascular endothelium stopped the leukocyte and made it to transiently adhere and roll. Then some permanent पक्का शादी हो जाना चाहिए ना, तो वो शादी हो जाएगा immunoglobulin family of adhesion proteins से. That's the reason they are called family. After शादी only you will become a family, no? So, with whom will they get married to? On the leukocytes, you have integrins. To them, this ECOM1, ECOM2 on the endothelial cells will be binding. Similarly, we have VCAMs, which are also the part of the immunoglobulin family of adhesion proteins. They are called vascular cell adhesion molecules. They are also expressed on the endothelium, and they bind with the integrin molecules on the leukocytes, is what you need to understand. So summarize, doctor. We have ECOM1, ECOM2, ECOM3. All these are, where are they located? ECOM1, they're all located on the vascular endothelium, and basically they will enable the various types of inflammatory cells to stop and adhere with the vascular endothelium. Now this is another way to depict the same. If you are having this ECOM1 and ECOM2, they are enabling the T cell to basically bind. Now, there is one more place where ECOM1 is having a role. You have antigen presenting cells. What is their purpose? They are like a police constable or a police circle inspector. What is his job? Can he punish? He can't punish. Only in movies he can do that. He has no right to punish. To pronounce punishment is the purpose of judge. Judge will decide. He can only arrest. So, antigen presenting cells will arrest the antigen. This fellow is a foreign fellow. He is not the native of this place. He is a dangerous guy. He will arrest. So, antigen presenting cells will express this ECOM1 in addition to the vascular endothelial cells, is what we have to basically appreciate. Then the next important group of adhesion molecules we need to know are integrins. What are they? What are the various molecules which are called integrins? LFA1, MAC1, BLA4, these are all basically called as the integrins. Where are they located? They are located on the leukocyte. Whereas ECOM1, BCOM1, they are all on endothelium and also on antigen presenting cells, ECOM1. So these integrins, they bind to the immunoglobulin family adhesion molecules. ECOM1, ECOM2 are there no, on the vascular endothelium. They bind with the integrins which are there on the leukocyte. And what are those integrins on the leukocyte? LFA1, MAC1, BLA4, etc., etc. Now, after the a very important step is the stronger adhesion between the leukocyte and the vascular endothelium should occur, which is basically mediated by the integrins. Now you can see this is a leukocyte. On the leukocyte, that activated integrin is there. Once this activated integrin is expressed, then ECOM1 can be able to bind with the leukocyte very firmly, is what need to be remembered. Once it firmly binds to the vascular endothelium, the next step is called transmigration. It needs to cross the vascular endothelium and enter into tissues. So, once more, the ECOM1, the PCOM1, these are the ones which basically mediate the transmigration, which enables the diapedesis. Squeezing between the cells of the leukocytes is what we need to basically appreciate. So, who is the mediator of the transmigration, doctor? Mainly PCOM1, PECAM1 is the one which is basically the main mediator. Now, there is one more important function of the integrins. What is that? One function of the integrin we understood. On the leukocytes it is expressed and that binds with the immunoglobulin superfamily proteins expressed on the vascular endothelium. Additionally, it has one more purpose. Typically, the integrin which is expressed on the T cell will be in a low affinity stage. That is, a antigen presenting cell is bringing the thief, but the judge is not ready. He is not available for giving a judgment, right? Then chemokines are expressed. These chemokines will go and bind with the chemokine receptor on the T cell. On binding of chemokine to the chemokine receptor on the T cell, the integrin on the T cell will reach a high affinity state. Once it reaches high affinity state, then it will bind with this antigen presenting cell. Once T cell and antigen presenting cell bind with each other, then the T cell become an activated T cell. And it will show its ultimate power. Okay? So, the role of the integrins is basically, one more important role is to enable antigen presenting cell and the T cell to bind with each other. And who enables the integrin to come to a high affinity state? It is those chemokines binding with the chemokine receptor, is what we need to appreciate. Then one of the very important type of integrin is called as LFA1. LFA1 is also called the lymphocyte function associated antigen 1 is the name which is being given. So this LFA1 is the one, as I told you, the most important integrin expressed on the T lymphocytes, T cells, which is generally in a low affinity state. On chemokine activation it becomes high affinity and it will make it to bind with APC. So that's what we need to appreciate. So you can see antigen presenting cells, they have receptors for the integrin. They are called ECOM1, ECOM2, and the T cells integrin, which is LFA1, which is in a low affinity state, become high affinity and enable the APC bind with the T cell. So what are the various roles of the integrins, doctor. They are not only important for these two things which we have seen. What are the two things we have seen? They enable the leukocyte to adhere tightly with the vascular endothelium. Second, they also will enable a APC bind with the T cell. One more important function is platelet aggregation. They have found that integrins are important. For the wound healing, it is important. And for the embryogenesis, tissue migration, tumor metastasis, for so many things, integrin is having a very, very important and a crucial role. So you understood, doctor? Initially, due to selectin, there is a loose binding. Then there is a rolling. After the rolling, there is a tight binding. After that, there is a diapedesis and then migration of the inflammatory cell is what we have to fundamentally appreciate. There's one more thing for you to reinforce. We have the endothelial cells, right? On that the selectin is being expressed. That enables leukocyte to bind. And after that integrins and ECOM will create a more stronger binding. So that's all what need to be understood. So having had understood this much, to answer MCQs in exam is easy. Because you don't know what is LFA1, what is selectin, what is integrin, what is ECOM, what is VCOM. Solving MCQs is a boring job. Now you know who is where, what are they doing, what is their main purpose. Remaining part of acute inflammation is a very easy pass through, which all of you know very well. So what are the important vasoactive changes in the acute inflammation, doctor? Yeah. So, right. So what are the important vasoactive changes? There is a vasoconstriction which is followed shortly by a vasodilatation of the arterioles and capillaries. That is the most important vascular change. Because of this vasodilatation, what will occur, doctor? There will be redness, increased warmth, the classical signs of acute inflammation. So this is a normal vessel and this is an inflamed vessel where there is a neutrophil migration and vasodilatation, etc., etc. So in acute inflammation, after initial vasoconstriction, there is a vasodilatation. Then there is an increased capillary permeability. The next important step in the acute inflammation. Because of that, there is a leakage of the proteinaceous material which will predispose to the development of edema. Then what lead to development of this leakage of this proteinaceous material, doctor? During acute inflammation, the endothelium get damaged in the arterioles, capillaries and venules, which will increase their capillary permeability. There is a widening of the interendothelial gaps. All this will enable the edema to develop in acute inflammation. Now, if you look at the various types of inflammatory cells, we have neutrophils, monocytes and macrophages, eosinophils and basophils. Let's go through the fundamental pathology. Neutrophils. If I ask you, in the first 24 hours in acute inflammation, who is the first to arrive? Whenever there is if a house is burnt, who is first to arrive? Nowadays, politicians, because elections are very close. Second, news, because 24 hours to run your house getting burnt, to be seen by entire world, news channel people are very interested. So, most prominent inflammatory cell to arrive in acute inflammation, common question exam, neutrophils. So what are the various causes of neutrophilia, doctor? Whenever neutrophil count is increased, think of bacterial infection and infarction. Bacterial infection, not viral, and infarction are the two important causes. And the increased neutrophil count in bacterial infection is all because of the less mature type of cells, which are called the band neutrophils, which are the underlying cause, is what need to be remembered. So these are the neutrophils typically which are increased in neutrophilic state. After 2 to 3 days, the neutrophils are replaced by the monocytes and macrophages, is what need to be remembered. And these monocyte macrophages, they can be able to engulf larger particles basically, and they are more longer lived, unlike the neutrophils. They will be proliferating. So what are the important causes of monocytosis? One of the favorite questions of the examiner. TB, brucellosis, typhus, salmonella, these are all considered to be the important causes of the monocytosis. So you can see how a typical monocyte basically looks like. Then comes the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are the most prominent inflammatory cells, especially in viral infections. And whenever the inflammation changes from acute into chronic inflammation, how will a pathologist recognize? By the appearance of the lymphocytes, he will recognize. So what are the causes of the lymphocytosis? Viral infections predominantly elicit a lymphocytotic reaction. Influenza, mumps, rubella, infectious mononucleosis, etc., etc. Now what is an exceptional to the rule? Which bacterial infections, though they are not viral infections, can lead to lymphocytic response? Pertussis, Bordetella pertussis, whooping cough. Tuberculosis, though it is bacterial, still lymphocytosis is a predominant response. So try to recognize the basic complete blood picture slide, doctor. You know, these biconcave discs are all RBCs. Then you are having an eosinophil. This is how, with all its lobes, a neutrophil looks. The very stain and staining pattern make you recognize basophil. Then you have the lymphocytes, and you are having the monocytes. And whenever the neutrophil excessively is produced in neutrophilic state, then band neutrophils typically look like this, is what I want to once more underscore to all of you. So this is a classical example of a response which is basically called as the lymphocytotic response, where the lymphocytes are increased in number, right? Then lot of times we say microcytic, macrocytic anemia. Then in all such scenarios, RBC size is compared with whom, doctor? In the peripheral smear, once more with the small lymphocytes, it is being compared. The RBC size is what need to be remembered. Now comes the next important issue. Yeah. Eosinophils. Whenever there is an allergic reaction or a parasitic infection like amoebiasis, then we have eosinophil count increased. What are the causes of eosinophilia? Asthma, hay fever, hives, these are all the allergies. Then parasitic infection, then which vasculitis associated with eosinophilia? One of the favorite questions of the examiner. Polyarthritis nodosa, Church-Strauss syndrome, you have got immense amount of eosinophilia. Then Hodgkin's lymphoma also will elicit eosinophilia. Within the tissue also you may find eosinophilic response. Into the tissues also it can happen. Now the next important cell is the mast cells and the basophils. Why you need to remember? Because histamine, they are the main source of histamine. And what are the causes of basophilia? Generally you don't find basophils increased in number. If the basophils are increased in number, then it is a bad news. It is not like a neutrophil count increasing or lymphocyte count increasing. Basophil count is increased, it means there is something more serious things hematologist has to start doing. Myeloproliferative disorders, CML. They are the two important scenarios where the basophil count typically increases. So you are having a basophil typically looking like this, right? So this is how an eosinophil depicted and multilobated neutrophil, and you are having a monocyte looking like a oasis, a Hussain Sagar lake seen through aeroplane when you look down. Then, so this is what we need to recognize. Now, doctor, what are the various cellular responses of the leukocytes? First, they need to immigrate. Immigrate from where to where? Between the endothelial cells into the adjacent interstitial tissues. How will they immigrate? They are running, they don't know. Heart is pumping them, once more heart is calling them. Their job is to run in the blood. Suddenly they need to stop and then look, oh, here there is a catastrophe and they need to stop. So, from the central blood they will be moving towards the endothelial surface. It is like a traffic on the New Delhi highway. So then margination. Then they come to vascular endothelium and try to adhere to that. Then pavementing. They need to line the endothelial surface. Then they need to roll loosely bound to the vascular endothelial surface. Then they need to adhere where our integrins and immunoglobulin family of adhesion proteins come into role. Then they need to transmigrate. And who will stimulate the transmigration? Across the vascular endothelium, we have got the platelet endothelial cell adhesion molecules are the ones which are basically the mediators of that transmigration. Then somehow they have crossed the vascular endothelium and entered into the interstitial tissue. Then they need to locate. They need to put a torch and see where is the inflammation and they need to go there. So, they need to have some chemotactic factors which will say, here is the inflammation, doctor, please come. Somebody will be inviting. So, what are those chemotactic factors? One of the favorite questions of the examiner. C5a, complement component C5a, leukotriene B4, LTB4. Then HET, hydroxy equals a tetraenoic acid. And we are having kallikrein, which is a product of the kinin system. And the bacterial products themselves, they all stand as a strong chemotactic factors for the neutrophils is what need to be remembered. So ultimately, chemotaxis has happened. After that, what is the next important step? They need to swallow that pathogen which already has reached the interstitial tissue. That is a place where pathogen already is sitting. Infected cells are there. So it needs to phagocytize it. How will it do? So basically, that antigen of that pathogen, it needs to be internalized. That is swallowed by the macrophage system basically. And what is formed is called as phagosome. When the macrophage engulfs that opsonized antigen containing organism, you call it as phagosome. Then phagosomes need to fuse with the lysosomes which are there inside the macrophage. And that is called phagolysosome. Once that happens, lysosome need to degranulate and release the bomb. And that should then kill the organism which has been engulfed. So these are all the various steps. So how will people develop repeated infection and immunodeficiency? When the antigen containing organism infected the tissues, their phagocytes may not know how to run towards the focus of infection. Chemotactic defect can be there. Even if it is there, even if they reach, they may not be able to engulf. Even if they engulf, they may not be able to fuse with lysosome. Even if they fuse, they may not be able to burst out the lysosomal products. Any of the steps can lead to different types of the immunodeficiency states is what you need to basically remember. So, Opsonization is a very important step. What is the meaning of it? To facilitate phagocytosis, first of all, opsonins will immobilize the particles, that is the organism on the surface of the macrophage, and increase the antigenicity of it. So, one of the favorite questions asked by the examiner is, what are the opsonins? Opsonins are different from chemotactic factors. A lot of times people have a confusion, which complement is for what? Which complement is for the chemotaxis, doctor? C5a. Whereas C3b, complement C3b is very important for opsonization. Then immunoglobulin G subtypes are also very important for this opsonizing purpose. So what will happen during opsonization? The immunoglobulin G will be opsonizing the fragments of the antigen, and the fragments opsonized by the immunoglobulin G will become bound to the phagocytic cell on its cell surface. On the cell surface of the phagocyte, you have a receptor for the immunoglobulin G, which is called as receptors for the Fc portion of the immunoglobulin G. So that is the reason, which is the most important immunoglobulin which is involved in opsonization process, doctor? It is the immunoglobulin G which is most important, is what you need to basically remember. Similarly, on the macrophage, there are receptors for the C3b. So C3b's purpose is simple. It will bind with the antigen and it has receptors on the macrophage. That way the bound antigen has to be bound with ultimately macrophage, and that is the first step for the antigen to be engulfed by the macrophage, is what we have to fundamentally appreciate. Then, doctor, intracellular microbial killing is the next very, very important step that need to be remembered. This is a very interesting concept we need to understand thoroughly. Two types of killing happens of the microbes by our immune system. One is called oxygen dependent microbial killing, other is called oxygen independent microbial killing. We need to fundamentally differentiate between the two. So, between the two, which is more important, doctor? Between the two, the most important step is oxygen dependent process. So, how does this basically happen is a very important issue. We have one HM patient. Do you still remember where is the pentose phosphate pathway? Yeah. So, the HM patient initiates this process which is oxygen dependent killing. What will it do? There is, the moment the organism is being engulfed, there is an oxidative burst which will happen, and that oxidative burst will be supplying the electrons to the NADPH oxidase which is present inside the phagosomal membrane. So microbe is there, doctor, it is being taken up, phagosome has happened. Then what happened? Inside the phagosome, what are the reactions which are happening, which are oxygen dependent killing process? NADPH converts into NADP+. Who supplies this NADPH? Hexose monophosphate shunt will be providing this NADPH. And this oxygen is there, no? This oxygen typically get converted into a oxygen free radical in the process. So one of the products of this NADPH oxidase system is the superoxide anion of the oxygen. The superoxide anion is then converted into hydrogen peroxide, and the hydrogen peroxide is further converted into the hydroxyl radical. Then comes another important system which is called myeloperoxidase halide system of bacterial killing. So what will this will be doing? This basically will this will be taking one halide ion. Can you give me water halogens? Chloride, bromide, fluoride, all these are halogens, no? So the halide ion like chloride and the hydrogen peroxidase both will combine to lead to a oxidized halide, which in turn will kill the microorganism, right? So this is the whole process by which ultimately the organism is killed. So summarize, doctor, what is happening in this process? NADPH converts into NADP, and during this process what will happen? Oxygen become oxygen free radical, superoxide radical. Oxygen superoxide radical will convert into hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide plus halide in the presence of myeloperoxidase will be leading to oxidized halide, which in turn will cause the killing of the microorganism. This is very fundamental to understand a lot of immunodeficiency disorders, right? I'll once more come back to this when we talk about chronic granulomatous disease in Chediak Higashi. Okay. Now, what is meant by oxygen independent microbial killing? Second way of killing an organism which is being phagocytized is we have lysozymes, lactoferrin, major basic protein in eosinophils, cationic proteins like bactericidal permeability increasing protein, defensins. All these systems, these are all basically proteins. Without the need of oxygen, they will be able to kill that microbe which has been engulfed by the macrophage. So these are all the part of the oxygen independent killing is what need to be remembered. Now comes a favorite MCQ of the examiner. If you take the various constituent enzymes of a lysosome, they are being divided into primary and secondary constituents. What do you mean by primary and secondary? Difference kya hai? Primary are non-specific, but secondary are specific whenever they are killing. They know whom they are killing. Primary are like that mad fellow who has a knife in his hand. Whoever appears, he will kill him. Right? So run amok is primary. Primary are also called eosinophilic in their nature. Myeloperoxidase, lysozyme, acid hydrolysis, these are all primary constituents. Whereas lactoferrin, then lysozyme, collagenase, alkaline phosphatase, they are all called secondary constituents. A lot of times this is a favorite question in the AIMS question bank as to which are primary, which are secondary constituents, which are specific, which are non-specific. For that matter, your myeloperoxidase is an example of a non-specific primary constituent of the lysozyme. So whenever this one more way to represent the same which we had spoken. I am little afraid that you will forget. Isliye. Oxygen taken up, converted into superoxide, converted into hydrogen peroxide, combined with chloride to form a hydroxychloride, and that in turn will lead to the death. And for the chloride halide to be combined with H2O2, you require myeloperoxidase is what we need to understand. So that is the story of oxygen dependent, oxygen independent forms of microbial killing. Now let us take up the next important issue. What are the various exogenous and endogenous inflammatory mediators is one of the favorite questions. Exogenous means a microbe will be infecting. For example, E. coli. The peptide in the structure of the E. coli itself can be a chemotactic factor for the neutrophil. That is exogenous. Then what are endogenous? That is, in our own human body we have a lot of mediators which are responsible for mediating the inflammation. We have 4 to 5 different types of endogenous mediators of acute inflammation. First group, first class we are going to talk about are called vasoactive amines. Histamine, serotonin. Serotonin, what is the other name given for it? 5-hydroxytryptamine is the name given for the serotonin. So histamine, who releases histamine, doctor? Basophils, mast cells, and also platelets. One of the favorite MCQ in the exam is, what happens to the capillary permeability under the influence of histamine? Histamine increases the capillary permeability. because it leads to development of contraction of the endothelial cells, which will enable the capillary permeability to increase and edema to form in acute inflammation. So doctor, histamines, you can see wherever they go, their property is to cause contraction of the smooth muscle. They do the same to even vessel. When the capillary vascular smooth muscle got contracted, that lead to more fluid to seep out, and that lead to edema. So histamine is one of the main mediators of the edema, is what need to be understood. Then, whenever the basophils or mast cells get triggered, there's a lot of release of histamine, is what we need to understand. Then, who is a very important immunoglobulin that you need to remember for the mast cell degranulation, for the histamine to be released by the mast cell? Immunoglobulin E. Whenever we have parasitic infections or whenever we are having an exogenous allergen, then immunoglobulin E. What is the difference between IgM and IgE in their mechanism of functioning? IgM, like immunoglobulins, require complement. IgE does not require any complement. So it is the mast cell membrane bound immunoglobulin E is the one which will enable the degranulation of the mast cell to release the histamine, is what you have to fundamentally appreciate. Then, whenever the C3A or C5A, these two are called as anaphylatoxins. What is the relationship between these complements C3A, C5A and the histamine, doctor? The binding of C3A and C5A, anaphylatoxin, to the cell surface of the basophils will make them to degranulate and release the histamine, which is responsible for edema, which is commonly seen in anaphylactic reaction. So that's the reason C3A, C5A also are known to lead to development of the release of the histamine, is what you need to understand. Similarly, interleukin 1. Whenever we have too much of heat or too much of cold, we develop edema. Have you any time experienced morning when you go for jogging, some guys will get big hives. That's called as exercise induced urticaria. Because heat and cold also can be the stimuli for the degranulation of the mast cells to release the histamine, leading to development of edema, is what you need to understand. So, histamine is also liberated from platelets. And who triggers the platelet released histamine, doctor? Platelet activating factor. Any thrombosis or any endothelial injury, any of them can lead to the development of the release of the histamine by the platelets. So summarize, mast cells, basophils, platelets, any of them can release the histamine, which is a powerful vasodilator and a vasoactive imine, and immunoglobulin E is the buzzword which you need to remember. Now, another favorite MCQ in the exam is platelet activating factor. Everything, anything about it you need to know. At least 5-6 things you know very confidently. What is the chemical structure of platelet activating factor? This is one common question in the exam. Acetyl glyceryl ether phosphoryl choline. It is looking like a Nizam king's name. Nizamiya ul ulum. So you are having acetyl glyceryl ether phosphoryl choline is basically platelet activating factor. Tomorrow examiner is going to ask you what is the name of it. AHPC is what need to be understood. Now, where is platelet activating factor is released? Basophilic granules and mast cells, endothelial cells, eosinophils, neutrophils, macrophages. They are all the ones which release the platelet activating factor. What is its function? As its name itself says, it will activate the platelets, it enable the aggregation of the platelets, is the very important function. Then one more important role of platelet activating factor is, it enables histamine release by the platelets, and also it enables the release of the serotonin, platelet activating factor. Then, What is the effect on bronchi of platelet activating factor? Bronchospastic and vasoactive in nature. And also it is capable of strongly stimulating the arachidonic acid metabolism, so that cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase pathway, all of them become superactivated under the influence of platelet activating factor. So, alkyl acetyl glycerophosphocholine is our platelet activating factor. Now, the second thing is serotonin. It is also called 5-hydroxytryptamine, very similar to histamine and liberated basically from platelets. You need to be very clear. It is also vasodilatory in nature, and even enterochromaffin cells are there, no? You remember, carcinoid tumor is there, no? Our old friend. Even that is capable of releasing the serotonin is what need to be understood. Then doctor, eicosanoids in acute inflammation. 1-2 key comments about different types of eicosanoids. You need to be sure. If it is IL-3, it should be IL-3 only. It can't be IL-1 in exam hall. If we become IL-1 instead of IL-3, examiner don't like that, right? So you need to be very clear. Basically, inflammation is a mugging topic because of this stupid cytokines. But still, let us master them. You have a cyclooxygenase, lipoxygenase pathway. Both of them are the common derivatives of arachidonic acid. Who releases arachidonic acid? It is the phospholipase C, which is responsible for metabolizing the steroid in the cell membrane and lead to the development of the arachidonic acid formation. From arachidonic acid through cyclooxygenase pathway, what are produced, doctor? Prostaglandin E, I, F, D, and also thromboxane A2. They are all the products of the cyclooxygenase. Then leukotriene B4 is one side, on one hand, C4, D4, E4 on the other hand. They are also the derivatives of the arachidonic acid from the arachidonic acid. Now, let us talk about thromboxane A2. Thromboxane A2 is a powerful platelet aggregant, and it is a powerful vasoconstrictor. See, Yudhishthira, Dharmaraja is born to Panduraj. Duryodhana, from morning to evening his joy is only villainy, is born to Dhritarashtra. But Panduraj and Dhritarashtra are their own brothers, right? So, the story of thromboxane A2 and prostacyclin is also same. Why? They both are born to same mother. But one fellow is villain, other fellow is the hero. So, prostacyclin is PGI2. And it is a vasodilator and inhibitor of platelet aggregation. Whereas thromboxane A2 is a vasoconstrictor and platelet aggregator. Lot of times we get a doubt. If you give a cyclooxygenase inhibitor, then it should inhibit both of them, no? Then what is the ultimate effect of a cyclooxygenase inhibitor on the platelet aggregation? Is always a doubt we get, right? Ultimately it lead to prevention of the platelet aggregation only, not promotion of it. Now doctor, lipoxygenase pathway. The first precursor which is being released from that is called HPETE, hydroperoxytetraenoic acid. From that, what is released? If it is a platelet, 12 HPETE is released, whereas if it is leukocyte, 15 HPETE and 5 HPETE are the ones which are basically released. Then this 5 HPETE which is being released from the leukocytes, in turn will be giving rise to HETE. What is the main purpose of HETE, doctor? It is a neutrophil chemoattracting factor, chemotaxic factor is what you have to ultimately remember. Then this 5-HETE का children होता है leukotrienes ultimately. So summarize, arachidonic acid gives rise to 5-HPET, 5-HPET gives rise to directly to leukotrienes, and there can also be HPT, 5-HPT, from that leukotrienes are produced. Now doctor, one of the very common question asked is, what is the difference in the role of LTB4 on one hand, LTC4, D4, E4 on the other hand? The place of their production is different, their purpose of functionality also is different. Neutrophils, you should remember, LTB4. Whereas LTC4, D4, E4, they're all vasoconstrictors, bronchoconstrictors. They increase the capillary permeability, and in fact C4, D4, E4 together are called slow reacting substances of the anaphylaxis is the name which is being given. So obviously, what is the favorite MCQ of the examiner? Which is the leukotriene, which is not a part of the slow reacting substance of anaphylaxis. It is not the B4, not the B4, but C4, D4, E4 jointly are called as slow reacting substances of anaphylaxis. Then 5-HPT will also give rise to something else which are called lipoxins. LXA4, LXB4, these two are called lipoxins, which are the derivatives of the 5-HPT in addition to leukotrienes. Another common question is, what is the function of these lipoxins? They inhibit, they don't stimulate. They inhibit the PMN neutrophils and eosinophils, but they activate the monocytes and macrophages. And lipoxins are very much important for resolving the inflammation. If everything promotes only inflammation, we won't exist. Everybody will have rheumatoid arthritis. Our body should naturally have anti-inflammatory defensive mechanism which is played by lipoxins, is what you need to remember. And that is the reason they have found that using lipoxins has a wonderful anti-inflammatory effect overall, is what you need to understand. So, on one side, the cousin of the lipoxin, leukotrienes, promotes inflammation, whereas lipoxins are anti-inflammatory. Now, doctor, comes the cytokines. Cytokines are fundamentally soluble proteins by structure. Interferon gamma, have you heard of this? Very important cytokine. Who produces? Not B cells, not monocytes, not macrophages, not platelets, not endothelium. Who produces them? It is the natural killer cells and T cells. And also activated monocytes, any of them. Then IL-1 and TNF, they are very important for inducing an acute phase response in acute inflammation. Can you tell me what is acute phase response of an acute inflammatory state? We get fever whenever we have acute inflammation. That is the systemic effect. Then in the liver, C-reactive protein, amyloid associated protein, complement components, alpha-2 macroglobulin, ferritin. Why ferritin is important? How will you differentiate iron deficiency anemia from the anemia of the chronic inflammation? Since anemia of chronic inflammation is an inflammatory state, acute phase reactant like ferritin elevates, whereas in iron deficiency anemia, low ferritin is what you come across. So, who stimulates ferritin production in inflammation? It is the interleukin 1 and TNF. Then the adhesion molecules which you have studied in the initial part of our discussion, they are all basically synthesized because of the influence of interleukin 1 and TNF. The neutrophils degranulation is also mediated by them. And if you look at the endothelium, doctor, endothelium, what is the modern concept about myocardial infarction? Myocardial infarction, all of you know, is due to some thrombus formation inside the coronaries. Agreed, no? But what promotes the thrombus formation? Naturally, only coronaries have an ability of thromboresistant nature. Anti-thrombotic defenses will be there. But any chronic inflammation will lead to that loss of the thromboresistant nature. and promotes the thrombotic nature. So ultimately heart attacks are also due to inflammation, because during inflammation due to interleukin 1 and TNF, that anti-thrombotic nature of the vascular endothelium is lost, and that promotes the prothrombotic state, which is mediated once more by interleukin 1 and TNF, is what need to be remembered. So so cytokines are a very important issue. Now, all cytokines are not pro-inflammatory in nature. You must be very clear. Which cytokines then in that case are down regulators of inflammation? Interleukin 10, interleukin 11 and TGF beta, not alpha. This is one of the favorite questions of the examiner. TGF beta, what is the purpose of it? It is by nature anti-inflammatory in nature. Whereas interleukin 3, IL-7, IL-9, TNF alpha, they're all basically the ones which maintain the inflammation, is what you need to appreciate. So that's all the story of cytokines. Then doctor, in the acute inflammation, we have a kinin system. So what is the importance of this whenever we have acute inflammation? There's one Hagman factor, factor 12A. Do you remember? In the coagulation cascade, which we discussed in physiology. It is the one which initiates this kinin system, is what you need to understand. In fact, this Hagman factor, which is factor 12A, is very important. It is the same factor 12A which initiates kinin system, coagulation system, plasminogen and fibrinolytic system, and complement system also. So many places it has got a switch, basically. Let's look into factor 12A. What will it do? You know, it activates the intrinsic pathway. Who initiates extrinsic pathway? Factor 7. 12A initiates intrinsic pathway. It also activates plasminogen system, which is fibrinolytic in nature. It also activates the kinin system, which in turn will cause complement cascade to get initiated. So that is the reason the factor 12A has a very, very important and a central role, is what need to be remembered.